Hello and welcome to Bitesize Edge. It's been a little while since I've done a podcast, so I am very excited to say I have the wonderful Mike Rogers with me today. Now, Mike is a voiceover artist, he's an actor, and he also works in learning and development. So I met Mike, we were just having this discussion before we started recording. I think that we have known each other 8 years, which seems like such a long time, but not, Mike, not. Hello.
Hello, Jules, and thanks for having me here.
You're very welcome.
I'm really good, thank you. Yes, we're still in this strange lockdown time, and I'm curiously quite enjoying it. You know, I know it's been an absolute nightmare for various people, but for one reason or another, it's suited me and my immediate family very well. So I'm actually enjoying the change of life, and things are quite good at the moment. So thank you for asking.
Wonderful. So you said you're quite enjoying it. So I know that you work as a voiceover artist, and you have a fantastic setup in your man cave with your recording booth, which I've had the privilege of recording in not that long ago, actually, when we were doing some creative voices for a book. So you do a lot of your work from your man cave anyway. So I'm guessing that lockdown hasn't made a huge impact on you from that point of view.
Well, strangely, work started coming in a little more than I anticipated. So with the closure of a lot of the London studios in the lockdown, work was spilling out from particularly audio producing companies. Audio books is what I do mainly, unabridged audio books. And so I've had a fairly constant supply, in fact, a very constant supply of audiobooks, and I've typically had 2 on the go at the same time, coupled with a lot of learning and development virtual delivery, which has also come in quite quickly. So I work in that field for a number of different consultancies, some of whom were already a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of their online delivery. The mixed and blended learning, they call it, so a mixture of face-to-face learning that we would have done and the online backup delivery. And now because they were ahead of the curve, a lot of their clients knew that they could provide some of this training, communication skills training online. And so I've been very busy doing that as well, and pouring the recording of the books around that, as it were. So yeah, it's actually impacted me quite positively in terms of the work, though I'm not entirely sure, of course, that will carry on for the rest of the year. So I'm kind of curious to see how work will develop, and I'm presuming it's going to fade away a little bit on the learning development front once people know how to conduct more successful Zoom meetings and things like that, which is the content of a lot of what I'm doing at the moment.
And are you missing the face-to-face stuff? Are you missing the training?
I am.
Yeah.
I am, because that's where the magic happens, really, as you well know, because you've been working in the same field for a long time as well. A lot of the face-to-face stuff, it's about personal chemistry and charisma and the warmth that you can exude, and the signals and signs that you can pick up from people, all those little micro signals of body language and tone and that kind of thing. It's much harder on the virtual platforms, and people are consequently working very much harder, and there is always this barrier of technology to overcome, and sometimes it lets people down, as it has been letting me down and some of the clients I've been working with. And I'm really missing the warmth and often the different type of humor actually that you get face to face. And also, I used to travel quite a lot around the world with my work. I've been very, very lucky over the last 7 or 8 years to travel widely doing what I do, and that took me to some very exotic places with some fabulous people, and I'm missing them and missing those places.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because it's not just the training room environment, and I hear you with that, because I think although with my Edge hat on, we run our courses at our fabulous HQ and I'm missing that. I think a lot of the other freelance work I do within L&D, I'm missing too, because it's the variety of it, it's the people. And that's the thing that I think is really challenging to create via, you know, a virtual platform, that connection that you have. But I feel it's almost as if we've been forced into the space of going, well, you either do or you're going to be left behind.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one. I know for Pip and I to start with, we were quite resistant to bringing our NLP courses virtually, because we just thought, how are we going to be able to connect with people? But we did, you came in on one of our superpower sessions, and actually they worked brilliantly via Zoom and having the breakout groups. It's just about flexing how we do things. And I did find it really challenging to begin with, being a highly kinesthetic individual. I find that barrier of the computer screen quite challenging. So I know from a personal point of view, I've had to work quite hard, and like you, Mike, really missing those people. I mean, I haven't been doing the amount of travel you've been doing, but way back when we used to do a lot of travel together.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
I agree with that. I really do. So what, when we think about when lockdown is lifted, people keep saying about going back to normal or what the new norm is going to be. What are your thoughts when it comes to learning and development, especially?
Yeah, I think in that sphere, I think the new normal will carry on including a great deal of virtual work. I think, and I'm hearing anecdotally, that a lot of businesses are realizing that work is still getting done by people remotely in a way that perhaps they hadn't anticipated to the same degree of success. And that now people are scratching their chins and saying, why do we pay all this money to have this wonderful snazzy office and to have it serviced this way and that way, when actually, if we look at our outputs, some of it seems as achievable without putting people in the office. And so I'm hearing anecdotally that people might be going down to fewer days. That means they can spread out, choose their days a little bit more and do the rest of their days from home, which was always a trend. And I think the way that will work and impact the likes of us who work in learning and development mean that we need to be training about that sphere as well as in that sphere. So what new capabilities there are within the virtual platforms, how one can shape etiquette and agree new contracts of behavior with one another over those kind of platforms. What happens when you have to have a really difficult conversation and you can't do it face to face? Those kind of things do need some thought, and often they need practice, which is the kind of thing that I do, and I know you've been involved in, Jules, as well, helping people practice and build up to difficult conversations or complex conversations that they want to handle as effectively as they can. So some of that is about, it will be in the future continually how you make that work for yourself over these virtual platforms, and occasionally some face-to-face training as well. But I do think, in summary, that gone are the days where we will be flying across the world and working, going in and out of Heathrow Airport 2 or 3 times a week. And I'm sure that that's no bad thing for the planet at all. My conscience is slightly clearer now than it used to be a few months ago.
Yeah, there's just, I definitely agree with you. Just that level of, I think we're becoming so much more conscious of what is happening around us. And very quickly, things were very noticeable from the point of view of being able to see the stars, just the silence in the morning, just hearing the bird song, all of those little things that suddenly it was almost so loud. The silence felt so loud, if that makes sense, that there's so many things that we're learning through this process and will be in a place to really, really reflect on. So yeah, maybe gone are the days of, that epic amount of travel that you were doing.
Yeah.
Kind of touched on your L&D story. Talk to me a little bit, Mike, because I know a lot of people will be interested in this. So you work as a voiceover artist. Your main
Mm.
thing, I guess, is your audiobooks, but you are also an actor. So talk to me about how those two things kind of fit together.
Yeah, so I still nominally call myself an actor, and most of the work that I do revolves around having that as a background, really. So I spent quite a while working as a jobbing actor, doing lots of touring, again, around the world, lots of European touring and so on. Because I spent so much time abroad, in fact, I never particularly forged a very strong career here back in the UK. I was spending probably 60 or 70% of my time in theatres elsewhere. And consequently, one way or another, my career didn't really take off. So I had to kind of think, well, what else might I do? And I began to do a little bit of customer role play. Goodness, about possibly 20 years ago now, where you rock up as a irate customer, and people are training on how to deal with you and that kind of thing. So from those early role play days, I began to get a little bit more interested in the mechanics of what people were learning and how they needed to, or how it was best for them to deal with the public and so on. And my curiosity was watered. I just saw lots of opportunities for myself and for other people with similar skills to do much more with that in that kind of field. And I suppose I developed a career partly by accident, partly by a little bit of shaping on my own side of doing role play, which then became, it overlapped with a bit of coaching, and then I started doing some presenting and lots of facilitation work on how to present, and it just grew really, and so it grew quite exponentially until now. I'm doing lots of lead facilitation, support facilitation, some coaching, and less role play, but more designing of simulations for various companies. So if they want to have a particular skill set that they would encourage particular lead managers or leadership teams to be demonstrating, often they'll come to the likes of me and some of the consultancies I work for to design simulations on how that behavior might look. So we sort of practice it and trial it out, if you like, in a safe environment. So I'm doing that. And just to answer the other side of that question, the voiceover stuff, I found that with all the travel I was doing, we talked about earlier on, I needed to be at home. I got two kids, a lovely wife, and the rest of it. And I wanted to be at home a little bit. And I found that from the voiceover work that I began to do, again around the same time, around 20 years ago or so, I was able to just make it count a little bit more than the acting work that I'd been doing. So it was a little bit more of a meritocracy. You could do a good job and people would ask you back, without the difficulty of having to mount a full-scale new production. So I'm sorry, it's a long-winded answer this, but I began to realize that if I did a good job here, I could get some recommendations, and they were enough to give me more and more work. And I really, really enjoy that, reading books, embodying the story, and making sure that the story that gets told is as close to how the author, one hopes, would anticipate it being told. And there's a similarity there with the learning and development stuff. It's about how people can tell the story that they want to tell, and in the way that makes them feel they've done it in the most effective way. It's a bit of a tenuous overlap, but they do link.
That's really interesting, because I've never really thought about it like that, that there is that overlap. But it is, isn't it? In essence, it's what story are we telling? What story do we want to tell, and how do we want it to land?
Yeah.
I love that. I love the fact that there is that, line through everything that you do, and it sounds as though it's really, it's been a really organic process, as in things have come into your life because of something else, and then something else happens, and it's the connection with people and the material and the work. And it sounds like you've absolutely got all of these elements flowing beautifully so that you have that variety. Because I know we're fairly similar in the fact that there is, well, I'm making an assumption we're fairly similar, Mike, from being acting background and voiceover work and working in L&D. I think one of the things for me that is absolutely key is variety. Just having lots of different things going on, just to keep the brain ticking over and keep that creativity flowing. And it sounds as though you've absolutely got that, which is fabulous.
It really is great, and yeah, I like you. I really enjoy that, and I've come out of jobs with you many a time over the years, and we've had big smiles on our faces because we know we've left one thing and moving on to another. We've done a good job. We're moving on, and I've never been somebody who can just stay in the same office. Month after month, year after year. It's just not me. It's no criticism of the people who can and want to do that. That's absolutely great and fine. I find that stifling. And anywhere other than my own man cave that you mentioned, I really struggle with that. And I feel very lucky to have that balance now. And it is a great deal of luck, I think, because it's not, you can't just choose a career like acting and the theatre, for example, and just sit on it and hope that it takes you somewhere. You have got to make some tricky decisions and have a bit of luck along the way. A lot of luck if you need to make it all the way up to the top of the acting profession, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I just want to tell you a quick story of how when I was reaching out to audio production companies, that there was a time where I was getting really fed up. I was in a bit of financial trouble because acting doesn't, even when you're working, doesn't pay a great deal, as you know. And I thought, actually, I've got to make a shift here. I've got to make some decisions that do bring me a little bit more income and more variety. And I wrote to all the audio production companies who do audiobooks that I could get my hands on. And I don't know if I've ever told you this, Jules, but I sent them all a tea bag. I know I told you this story. I sent them a tea bag, a posh tea bag. I sent them a posh tea bag with a letter saying, please put the kettle on, have a cup of tea, and have a listen to this voice demo reel. So it was just something to help myself stand out a little bit, and to make it slightly more likely that they wouldn't just throw my CD as it was then back onto a little pile in the corner. And I wrote goodness knows how many letters, just as I had to hundreds of casting directors in the past.
Gosh, those days.
Oh yeah, that was a nightmare. All those letters and CVs and photographs. But I wasn't really hopeful, given the almost zero response I'd had all those years from casting directors. But I got one response from the head of one of the huge audio production companies in this country, and she said, her opening line was, Mike, I'm a coffee drinker, but I liked the idea. So I put the kettle on and made myself a coffee and had a listen to your show reel, which was great. How would you fancy reading this book or this one? And when I got that email through, I have to say, a little tear ran down my face, because it was the first positive response that I'd had to some of my own proactivity to develop my career that I'd had in years up to that point. And it was a real turning point, because I carried on recording for them and still do to this day. And, because of work for them, other work has come from other companies as well. So sometimes you just have to kind of think, best can I take a punt to make a change? And that particular foray worked for me. Yeah.
That's incredible. And, the fact that you're still working with them, I think really is to you for the way that you connect with people, and just the kind of person that you are. Let me ask you a quick question. You came and did your NLP course with us in 2016, and I don't want this to be a whole thing around tell us about, your experience with Edge. Not at all. But what I do want to ask you is just, I know because I was co-delivering the course. I know for you, Mike, it was there were some big things going on for you through that course. Quite a big kind of personal week, and growth, and realizations and light bulb moments and all the things in between. But that was 2016. We're now in 2020. Would we believe it? What did you, or what do you take from the course, if anything? Do how do you think about it? Do you use anything from it? What are your thoughts? That wasn't very well asked, Mike, but you know where I'm going with this.
I've seen you run workshops on questioning skills. That was a cracker. Oh no, I'm joking. I'm joking. I love that. And let me start by saying I'm really happy to talk about that time. I loved doing that week course. It was a difficult time for me, actually. It turns out, though I turned up thinking, "Oh, we've been asked to bring issues that might be current in our lives, so that we can practice with them." And I genuinely didn't think I had very much to bring along. And it turns out I did. Yes, I had some things that were going on. I was grieving for my brother who died not long before, and that had left me a little kind of more fragile emotionally than often one imagines one is, just functioning on a day-to-day basis. But when you ask me what I think about the course and how I'm using it now, one of the things I really remember was the process of dealing with a limited belief or limiting belief. Which I'd really held on to a long time, because, and it links back to what I was saying earlier on about a measure of financial insecurity that was still with me at that point. And I just had come to believe that I would never be out of debt. And that was a story that I was telling myself. And that process just completely flipped that on its head. And actually, ever since that time, things have really changed around financially, and I'm in a much better position, and I don't think I've had a sleepless night about money ever since then. So that was a real palpable success, and similarly, I had some wonderful little measures of success that made me think a lot of those fabulous processes within NLP are so practical and useful for people on a day-to-day basis. And one of a very quick example, I'd been getting a bit cross with my then, I think, how old would he have been? He'd have been 13, 14, I think, maybe younger, Felix, my son, leaving his shoes, taking his shoes off at the bottom of the stairs and leaving them there. And every time I walked into the hall at the bottom of the stairs, there are his trainers, and I'm shouting, "Felix, come and move these, I'm in trainers." And I switched a reaction. Forgive me for not remembering the specifics of the process, but I swapped that reaction for a wonderful memory state of being laughing hysterically with a friend of mine, so that when I would encounter that particular trigger of the shoes at the bottom of the stairs, I would be able to have and summon a different reaction subconsciously. And when I came away from our week together on the prac course, I walked through the front door and burst out laughing. And I couldn't, for the life of me, work out what's going on. And it was, and then my conscious mind caught up with the fact that Felix's shoes were at the bottom of the stairs. And instead of bawling him out, shouting, "Felix!" I shouted, "Felix!" And he came down. He said, "What is it?" And I sat him down at the bottom of the stairs and told him all about the work that we'd been doing and how the processes worked and so on. And my daughter joined us, and we had one of the best conversations that we've ever had. And we talked for about an hour and a half, grinning and laughing, and they were absolutely fascinated by it. So there was that as a huge positivity, and I'm still using it. I don't use it quite as much as I perhaps anticipated I would, consciously, I should add, in terms of actually applying the processes with people and taking them through the systems as people have asked me. But I have had a number of requests, and even now, I've got two people who I'm due to work with, just working on the phobia model, which was it was wonderful to have a refresher with you and Pip online the other day, and worked a treat. And I also worked another process with somebody recently. The success of which I've yet to find out, actually, but I'm going to be chasing that up in a couple of days. So I'm using it and I love it, and I have very, very fond memories of our time together, and I'm very glad that you have chosen to do aspects of the work online as these refreshers. I'm glad I was able to catch the swish and the phobia model again as a refresher.
Yeah, no, they have been really well received. Yeah. And we're now actually looking at running, not looking at, we're running our first course completely virtually, our timeline therapy and hypnosis course, which starts 8th of June. So we're excited about that. And again, it just shows the power of being able to, adapt and flex to what life throws at you. But I'm so glad, and we laughed a lot in that week. I know there were many tears, but there was a lot of laughter. And like you, Mike, I feel very blessed for being where I am from a work point of view, and the flexibility and the variety and the connection with people. You never know who you're going to meet when they walk through the door, be it in a training room, be it on a training course, whatever it might be. And I think you said it, that's where the kind of magic happens. And it's just trusting that you as an individual, but you as a collective have a skill set that is going to be able to give something to someone somewhere. And I think that's such an honor and very humbling experience, and I'm sure that's one that you can resonate with.
Yeah, I would absolutely second that description of it, and it's very much down to, I don't want to sort of blow smoke in both yours and Pip's direction, but the atmosphere you both created at that time that I saw and witnessed. Having had a little taster session with Pip maybe a year previously anyway, I knew that there would be very good humour, a complete lack of preciousness other than the preciousness of care for one another that was obviously on show. But the language wasn't difficult, it wasn't formal, it was about people trying things practically and enjoying the process, because there's so much to enjoy in those processes, aren't there? I find them absolutely fascinating, the lists and so on. It's just really great. And I sort of want to ask you, Jules, a lot of what I came away from there on that week, and when I reflect on the NLP work that I've done and occasionally I'm still doing, it's about making positive choices, isn't it? About saying, okay, what's the best way I can serve myself now in this particular circumstance? Let me see what's going on, and as much as I can, make the positive choice. And you've made a lot of choices, in your life. How often do you talk to yourself in that way? Do you ask yourself that kind of question about, am I making the right choice?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. You're absolutely right. I think we all have choice. Often we don't feel like we have choice. And I know, the situation we find ourselves in now in lockdown, a lot of people are feeling that they don't have control, they don't have choice, but we all have choice. To differing degrees, we all have choice. And I think I'm much more aware of my intuition. So I trust my intuition a lot more. I call it intuition. You could call it whatever you want to. Maybe it's more that I'm connected to my my unconscious. So there's many a time where questions come up for me, and it's just about sitting quietly and really focusing in and being present and asking the question of myself, and really being open to what I'm answering it with, because sometimes I don't like the answer, so I'll choose a different answer. We're all human. We always make the right decisions. We always say NLP is not the panacea of everything. It's not suddenly you're going to do 6 days of training and fly out the window with your cape and your Superman or Superwoman or Wonder Woman pants on. But what it does do is remind you that there is always choice. And it's as simple as, are you in cause or are you in effect? Because you have a choice to sit in either of those. And at times we will all sit in effect, where everything happens to us and woe is me. But we have a choice, and we can step into cause, where we are much more in control of how we choose to live our lives and be the best versions we can be. And I know that always sounds a little bit cool, but I truly believe that. So yeah, I think it comes down to that. It just comes down to choice and being able to see that in every situation, no matter how small that choice might be, there is choice.
Yeah. And it's just recognizing that everybody else also is facing that. That's one of the things that I took away, is that, people are doing the best they can for themselves. They're serving themselves in the best way that they can for themselves at that time, which if not forgive, it helps you just take a moment to understand and put yourself in someone else's shoes, just a little bit more than we might be prepared to do otherwise, which again crosses over, doesn't it, into the work that we do, that we're putting ourselves as actors into other people's shoes all the time.
And just being kind, and if not now, then when. It's that kindness aspect, and it's something that I truly believe in. It's about, and you just said it right there, it's really believing it, that everybody's doing the best they can with the resources they have available to them and are aware of. But yes, so Mike, we could go on for hours, and I'm aware of time. It's always such a joy to talk to you. So thank you so much, Mike, for joining me today.
Same here. It's been a real pleasure.
A real pleasure. And yeah, thank you. Is there anything you wanted to add? Is there anything that you wanted to, is there anything going on for you at the moment that you want us to look out for? Do you have a website if people wanted to get in contact with you?
I do have a website. Yeah, there's news of the various audio books and sort of things that I do, and we were talking about the variety in my life. Yeah, I've got a website which tries to encompass all three of those things. So yeah, mikerodgers.info, INFO at the end, is where I blog occasionally about, and briefly, mercifully briefly, about the work that I'm doing. So you'll see the kind of books that I've been reading, which of late have been a lot of historical works. I've just finished reading Piers Plowman by William Langland, which is one of the first long narrative allegorical poems in the English language, and I don't think has been recorded fully ever before, or professionally anyway. It's in a version, thankfully, made slightly more modern by a Victorian gentleman, and I'm about to embark on a very long 19-hour French epic poem by someone else. And I have, what else have I got on the go? A second title in a series of 4 books about the Wars of the Roses by a chap called Derek Burks, who again made a very positive choice in his life. He was a history teacher and he loved writing, and he wrote the series of books which were phenomenally successful, self-published on Amazon, and he is now a professional writer, and he's on to his 6th series of books, which is difficult to say, Jules. 6th series, there you go. And I am reading the first one that he did, called Rebels and Sons, so I'm into the second one of that. It's a real galloping page turner of battles and mayhem in the Middle Ages. So that's what I'm doing.
All of this information, Mike, is on your website, which is mikerodgers.info, and I will share.
Correct. That's it. Yeah.
I'll put the information in the podcast anyway, so people can find you and discover what else you're up to. But Mike, thank you so much for your time today. As always, such a pleasure. And hopefully we will be able to get together soon for a cheeky glass of wine.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah. I really look forward to that day. Yes, and to celebrate your particular cause for celebration next year. It's going to be now, isn't it? But it is really looking forward to that.
The wedding of 2021 now.
Yeah, brilliant, Jules.
Thank you. So
Thanks
good.
a lot.
Thank you. Speak to you soon.
Take care. Thanks, lovely. Bye-bye. Bye.